Okay, then I suggest that we start. Welcome everyone to our STOA panel and meet event today. We will hold this event on energy transition and the EU hydrogen strategy in English only, so we don't have interpretation, unfortunately. But the event is web streamed and the link can be found on our event page. So we will make this recording available for downloading at the webpage of STOA. And as always, it's very welcome if you could place your questions via the chat, and of course indicate to whom your question might be directed. The topic of today couldn't indeed be more timely. So the energy transition and the EU hydrogen strategy, as I already said, we will see the proposal by the Commission we are all waiting for on the 14th of July. And it will be the biggest climate package in history of the European Union. So there was even an element added for the EU social fund for climate change. So we are all really excited, and we're expecting very concrete measures. So this will, of course, be relevant for upscaling of hydrogen. So we need to set the right boundaries, the right settings. And I'm especially looking at the Renewable Energies Directive. And I'm very happy that we have the Commission in this event to discuss, although I don't expect that you will already let us know what concretely you are going to propose, but maybe we can already discuss some points we might or we could expect. So what this workshop should contribute to is, so first of all, this event will allow the chief scientific advisors of the European Commission of the scientific advice mechanism to present their scientific opinion on the systematic approach to the energy transition in Europe. And we will also, this event should also serve that we can try to get some information in advance, as I already said, from the Director General. But let's see how this plays out or turns out. And it will also give us the opportunity to see the progress being made in the preparation of this STOA study, the potential of hydrogen for decarbonizing the EU industry, which will be released in September and will also be very timely. And I'm really I really hope for this, or I'm really waiting for this study. So we will start, well, maybe a quick update on the agenda. So we will receive an update on the development of the Fit for 55 legislative package for the first 20 minutes. After that, we will have for 25 minutes the possibility to look at a systematic approach to the energy transition in Europe. After that, we will dive into the potential of hydrogen, as I said, for decarbonizing the EU industry. And we will then have in half an hour from 12:55 to 1:25 for our discussion. And I would also spare my closing remarks if we have an intense discussion. So we could also discuss a little longer for that, because that's all we are here for, to get into all the details. And well, exactly now I'm I'm expected to stop with my introduction, and I will do so. And I will introduce Kitty Nitrai, and she will set the scene as head of unit of C2 for the update on the development of the Fit for 55 legislative package. And I would be happy if you could provide us with any info in advance, as I already said. And yeah, without wasting more time, I would suggest that you take the floor. I'm really happy that you are all here, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion today.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Birken. Maybe just a clarification, because actually I was asked to speak about the energy system integration and the hydrogen strategy. So there is nothing I can reveal about the Fit for 55 package, just to be clear and manage the expectations and the agreements taken. But it is true that it will be the biggest comprehensive package that the Commission will have ever tabled in the field of clean energy transition and climate, so fight against climate change. I don't even know anymore how many legislative proposals there will be in the package, because there will be many. But we, from the energy side, we are particularly working on two proposals, and that's the proposal on renewable energy and energy efficiency. So that, as a matter of introduction, to indeed go back where this vision comes from. And I would like to take you back for what was our thinking when we put forward the energy system integration strategy, which is a bit the guidance of what we wanted to do in the energy field during the mandate of this Commission. So, of course, the broad context is the European Green Deal and the vision of our President Ursula von der Leyen to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And we are very happy that the climate law has enshrined this now also in EU legislation for the first time. And this is, of course, for us a very, very good framework to really target our proposals to make this really happen. Because we all know that energy, the use and the production of energy accounts for about 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So if we want to get to climate neutrality, we have to deal with the use and the production of energy in Europe, and we have to transform this sector. And indeed, what we had in mind when we were drafting the strategy on energy system integration is that, of course, the future energy system must be much more decarbonized. It must be much more energy efficient, and we will need new technologies to do that. And in order to get there, we have to be, this energy system can no longer be looked at as silos, but we have to really exploit all the synergies that are there between the different sectors in order to be able to manage this transition towards climate neutrality. So to say the three great objectives of the system integration was, first of all, to have an energy system that is as efficient as possible. So really to exploit energy efficiency and not to waste any energy. The second big axis of action is, of course, electrification. So if you look at our energy mix of today and the energy mix by 2050, even though we will get more energy efficient, so we will overall consume less energy than we do today, it will be much more electric. So the absolute amount of electricity that we are going to consume by 2050 is going to increase, and its relative share will more than double. So our energy system and our economy will be largely electric. But this also means that, that we will also have a bit more than half of electricity, and according to some scenarios, even higher amount of electricity in the final consumption, and another part will be heat. But it means that we still need, even by 2050, we will need molecules, because not every sector, as we know today, can be electrified. So there will be sectors that are today very much dominant by fossil fuels, like transport, for example, and some parts of the heating system that could become electric, because we have highly efficient heat pumps, for example, for space heating. And for transport, we see that electromobility, so road transport electrification is finally taking off. And this is, of course, a careful interplay between what we put forward now also in the package in terms of cars standards, so car CO2 standards, but also all the related infrastructure, charging infrastructure, and the push also from the Renewable Energy Directive in that sense to make road transport become, so cars especially, become more electric and more efficient and more decarbonized. So coming back to what cannot be electrified according to today's knowledge, we have been looking how to decarbonize also the molecules that will be needed in the future energy system. And this is where hydrogen has now a renewed interest. So we remember, I think all of us, times where there were hydrogen hypes in the past, but we do think that this time is different. And there are three key reasons for that. The first reason is because this time the EU is serious. We have the serious and very ambitious target of being climate neutral by 2050, and this will require an accelerated pace of the transformation. So we cannot continue business as usual. We have to really exploit the new technologies and accelerate really the decarbonization. And that's why also the Fit for 55 package is stepping up already our 2030 objectives in order to be on track for climate neutrality by 2050. But the second big reason why hydrogen might have a different and a better chance this time around is because we are looking into the production of renewable hydrogen and doing that through electricity, and especially renewable electricity. And we have seen a dramatic decrease, so a dramatic fall in the costs of renewable electricity generation. Solar power in many parts of Europe is cheaper than fossil generation, and wind is also, onshore wind in several parts of Europe is cheaper than fossil generation, and offshore wind has experienced also drastic reductions in its cost. So we do think that all these technologies in the near term will become will reach grid parity, as we say, super competitive as opposed to their fossil alternatives. So we do think that this is now also a great moment for the production of hydrogen. And this takes me to the third big benefit of hydrogen in this new energy system. It is its energy system integration potential. So hydrogen can use and can help manage the variability of the renewable energy that we are going to have in the electricity system. It can help store energy, and it has the potential of decarbonizing sectors that so far seemed out of reach, be it in industry or also in certain areas of transport, for example, through renewable fuels, liquid fuels, if we need those in aviation and maritime transport. So and it is not just Europe who is engaging on this pathway. We see a great international interest also in hydrogen from all across the globe, be it from the US, Japan, Korea, but also in the Middle East. So there is a great interest and the race to develop hydrogen technologies. And for Europe, this is also an industrial opportunity because Europe is a leader for the moment in electrolyzer technologies. So what we were looking is how can we turn this into an industrial opportunity, both on the side of the production of the hydrogen, but also on the side of the production of products, so green products produced with renewable hydrogen, for example, green steel, because steel making is also one of the very promising areas for the future uses of hydrogen. So what do we need to make this hydrogen succeed this time around? First of all, we looked in our strategy, we need to scale up production and demand, and we need to do that in parallel. We have to avoid a chicken and egg situation as we have seen it in the past, where because there is not enough supply, industry is not moving towards hydrogen, so not enough demand. We would like to coordinate this process, and for this we have set up the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, where both the producers and also the future consumers of hydrogen can come together and discuss projects and concrete business opportunities on how to make this scaling up a reality and bring business opportunities to both on the demand side and on the supply side. We do know that at this stage, renewable hydrogen is not yet fully cost competitive. So, but we have a unique opportunity of the EU budget, the highest ever EU budget, taking together the multi-annual financial framework plus the recovery and resilience facility we have the highest ever EU budget in history, so we can also help kickstarting this economy, and especially under the flagship of Power Up. So by promoting renewable energy forms under the facility to really invest into these new technologies and to make them scale up, reach economies of scale, and reduce their costs. So when we talk about demand, I already mentioned the industry sectors and the steelmaking, but we have to also remember that we have today already quite an important consumption of hydrogen, and that is mainly in the chemical industry, in fertilizers, in refineries, and so petrochemical industries. And today's hydrogen consumption, which is around 10 million tons, 9.4 million tons, that's mostly gray hydrogen. So it's hydrogen that is produced with natural gas and where the emissions are just released into the atmosphere. So of course, there is already a market for hydrogen today. So one of the obvious starting points is to decarbonize today's hydrogen consumption already, and to replace it via renewable hydrogen, of course, is a matter of priority. But also in the strategy, we recognize that also other forms of low carbon hydrogen could be necessary in order to accelerate this space. Because what we put forward in terms of targets in the hydrogen strategy, we said 40 gigawatt of electrolyzers producing up to 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen. If you look at it, today's hydrogen consumption is around 10 million tons. So if we just get to it by 2030, then we would just be replacing the existing hydrogen production with renewable hydrogen production without going into new sectors. So we do recognize in the strategy that also other forms of low carbon hydrogen might be needed for a transitional period beyond renewable hydrogen. But renewable hydrogen is our priority because it is the form of hydrogen that brings also all the benefits of sector integration and being absolutely compatible with our 2050 agenda. So what we do beyond scaling up demand and supply, we are also looking into how we can facilitate the development of markets for this hydrogen. So we also looking into the future of how this hydrogen needs to be transported. So we do see today hydrogen valleys emerging, so more local use of hydrogen. But when we look at even the national plans, so several member states have adopted hydrogen strategies or hydrogen plans, and we do see that there will be some member states who will be producing more hydrogen than they will be consuming, and other member states who count on imports of renewable hydrogen from other member states or also from outside the EU. So all this means that at some point in time we will need efficient transport of hydrogen, and today via pipelines it seems to be the most efficient way of transporting hydrogen, and especially if we can reuse some of the gas pipelines that might at some point no longer be needed in the system. So by repurposing parts of today's well-developed European gas infrastructure into hydrogen transport, that can be a very cost-efficient option to solve the longer distance transport of renewable hydrogen and low-carbon hydrogen in the future. So we are looking into indeed setting the right framework for these market rules for hydrogen to emerge. We are looking into the certification of both renewable hydrogen and also low-carbon hydrogen, so as to be able to give this information to consumers so that they can make the choice to buy renewable and low-carbon hydrogen. So there will be an element of certification and there will be an element of market rules, but that's for the second half of the year, in which we will be looking which rules strike the right balance between helping such an emergent market to get investor certainty, but be still flexible to be able to adapt to the development of the market, which is at this stage of time very difficult to foresee. So that's more the package of the second half of the year, and this is all I wanted to say at this stage, and I'm happy to take afterwards the questions.
Kitty, thank you so much for this first intervention, and we still have 5 minutes, so we you could elaborate even further, or I could allow already some questions. So feel free to post them in the chat. And just as a reminder for the ones who are following us on the web stream, if you want to raise a question, please send it via Twitter to me so I can include it. Unfortunately, there is no chat possibility in the web stream. I checked it in parallel. So if there are folks watching us on the web stream and you want to be included in the discussion, just send us a short tweet and yeah, either use the hashtag STOA or just send it directly to me so that I can bring it up in our discussion here. So I don't see any questions yet. So maybe if you allow one follow-up question on your introduction. So the Joint Research Center has recently published an own policy brief about the hydrogen infrastructure, and the JRC recommends to study the feasibility of repurposing and improve and upscale current technologies involved in hydrogen delivery. So do you know, will there be a follow-up on that, or could you say a few words on that?
So, of course, for us, the scientific advice of the Joint Research Center is very, very important. And I don't know if they're planning a follow-up study to that, but I would expect, or to that specific study, but there are many, many studies that will still be required in order to make the hydrogen succeed. So, of course, there is part of the hydrogen technologies that are more mature, but we still need also further research and development to go into hydrogen technologies. So when we think pipeline technology, of course, is more mature, but there are still questions about safety and security. When we think about the electrolyzers, I mean, today's electrolyzers reach a scale, or electrolyzer projects that are ongoing, they reach a scale of around 10 to 20 megawatts. And that's fairly small. So, for example, under the Green Deal call of the Horizon 2020 program, the last one, we have launched a call for a 100 megawatt electrolyzer. And that's still under the program of research and innovation, because passing from 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts or even bigger scale, it will still require some more research and innovation going into that. So how do you build such a big electrolyzers? So do you stack them? Do you put them one next to the other? So there are all research questions still going into that field as well. So that's still necessary. In order to scale up the production, we need to still solve some of these challenges. So, and then there is also the Innovation Fund, which I didn't mention before, but also via the Innovation Fund, there is, and the second phase of the innovation. So there was a first call under the Innovation Fund that was launched last year, which has gone into its second phase. And now there is the next calls upcoming under the Innovation Fund, and also their clean hydrogen projects can be financed because they still need further research in order to reach maturity and to achieve indeed the cost reductions that we need for the energy use of hydrogen. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So we have one more minute for this slot, and you mentioned low carbon at the end of your introductory remarks. Will low carbon be dealt with in the red, or do we see this rather in the upcoming gas package? I think the Commissioner Simpson hasn't been too clear about that. Can you give any directions, or do we need to wait? Do we have to wait?
Absolutely, you will have to wait until the 14th of July. This is not something that I can tell at this stage. Of course, the Renewable Energy Directive, its first objective is to promote renewable energies. So low carbon is by definition is not renewable. So the Renewable Energy Directive wants to focus on renewable fuels. But we also need the low carbon energies and the certification of low carbon hydrogen in the market in order to drive the current grey hydrogen consumption towards the cleaner alternative. So both will be necessary, and we will do both, but it's a matter of packaging when which element will come. But it's important that both will need to be defined and traced and provided with a sound certification. And this is also important, not just within the EU. It is a very important point also within the EU, but also an important point for international cooperation, because if we one day will import renewable hydrogen from our neighbors, then we have to be able to and reassure that that is certified according to standards that also by the EU can be recognized as renewable.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And this would bring us to the second, well, Schwerpunkt in German, sorry, the second topic of today's debate. And this is a look at the systematic approach to energy transition. And we have two speakers for this slot. I was told that you organize yourselves who is going first, who takes over, but it's my honor to introduce to our discussion today Professor Nebojša Nakicenovic. I hope this was at least almost correct. So from the Chief Scientific Advisors of the European Commission and of the Scientific Advice Mechanism. And they are going to present their scientific opinion, a systematic approach to the energy transition in Europe. And this was prepared with the assistance of the consortium of European science academies. And for SAPEA, present here today is Professor Sabine Schlacke, and I'm really happy that you both found time to be here with us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and also for giving us an opportunity to present the energy transition in Europe. I have a couple of slides, and I would like to share my screen with you. I hope that works. But by the way, you pronounced my name perfectly, but please do call me Naki. It might be easier later on in the discussion.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So there might be some delay in the transition. I hope you can see my screen. You see two reports. On the left is the systemic approach to energy transition in Europe, the scientific opinion by the group of the chief advisors, and on the right is the SAPEA report with the same title, the evidence review report. And Sabine will, after me, my dear colleague and friend Sabine will present that after, and I will do the first half, next 12 minutes on the scientific opinion. But let me start first just telling you, this is all part of the scientific advice mechanism of the European Commission that consists of three parts. On the left, you see SAPEA, that's the Science Advice for Policy by the European Academies Consortium that consists of 105 academies, and they conduct the evidence review report. I would characterize that as a scientific assessment of the state of the knowledge on a particular topic. On top, you see the group of 7 chief scientific advisors, and we provide a scientific opinion, that means policy recommendations, based on the work of SAPEA and other evidence. And on the right is the Secretariat in the European Commission. And these are the three groups that work independently, but I would like to stress that we work jointly and very productively together. And I hope that the presentation of the energy transition will illustrate that. So let me just say a few words about the process that I hope you'll see in a minute. On top, on the left, are the major societal challenges that the European Commission and Europe might be facing, like implementation of the Green Deal, green and digital future, or recovery from the pandemic. And once a topic like that is chosen, like the energy transition, a scoping paper is developed together with the Commission, and that's kind of a terms of reference, if you wish, for our work. And then SAPEA organizes a working team, a working group, and Sabine will tell you more about that. And we work jointly on collecting the scientific evidence. There are expert meetings, as you can see in the row below. And once the SAPEA has drafted the report, the scientific advisors, we start working on the scientific opinion with the recommendations based on that evidence. There is a stakeholder meetings with the policy offices of European Commission. This is really important on getting the messages right. And at the end, that results in the two reports I've shown you. In this case, they were presented, or there was a handover to Commissioner Gabriel on the 29th of June, and we will hand over that to the other commissioners also in the due course. And of course, there is a great hope that this helps legislation and that it helps inform the policy process. So that's basically just a few words about how the SAM process works. Now, let me just show you who the current scientific advisors are. There are 7 advisors, but I would also like to recognize 2 of our colleagues who have rotated off, Karina and Rolf. Rolf was actually the last former chair of the group. This work on energy transition started 1.5 years ago, and I just joined the group in November. So we work together with the other colleagues on the scientific opinion ever since, and of course in collaboration with STOA. So let me just argue, and we talked about the Fit for 55 at the beginning. I would argue that both reports, and they should be seen together as a package, that both reports are anchored in the European Green Deal, and you all know that energy is really important for that. But the Green Deal can be seen as a vision for the future of Europe, and I also think an action plan of how the complexity of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of UN could be implemented, not just in Europe, but hopefully also worldwide. So we in our report, Scientific Opinion, we have 3 recommendations, but I will start with the recommendation 0, that is kind of a terms of reference, if you wish. I will just read you. We argue that energy policy needs to be designed clearly and be aimed toward achieving climate neutrality and sustainability, and importantly, without leaving anybody behind. And on the right is the illustration of the Fit for 55 package, that illustrate that the effort will be really heroic in the energy transition. As you're all aware, all sectors have to reduce down to about 55 of the 1990 emissions in just 8.5 years from now. And during the next 30 years to 2050, achieve neutrality. Now you can see that some of the emissions are still positive. That means we will need some net negative, and hopefully there will be the sustainable solutions like afforestation and sustainable agriculture. Now, this will require all heroic efforts. There is no doubt about it. And we argue that a holistic approach will be necessary to maximize synergies and avoid trade-offs and barriers across technologies, regulatory and market measures, but also social and behavioral changes, which are perhaps the biggest challenge. So let me come to the first recommendation, and that is to develop flexible, efficient, and resilient EU energy systems for delivering clean, accessible, and affordable energy services by integrating decarbonized energy sources, electrification, and the use of green hydrogen, and perhaps we start with the blue hydrogen. So hydrogen systems have an important role in our reports, and as Kitty said before, pervasive electrification as well. So that's, I think, very consistent what we heard from Kitty. So we have 3 sub-recommendations. To develop flexible systems in terms of pathways, different technologies, and scale of implementation. And this is really important because we have huge diversity in Europe, which is a kind of a richness and provides resilience. But that means that it has to allow alternative development pathways, hopefully toward the common goal of Fit for 55 and the Green Deal. Really important is to support investments in the infrastructures, general purpose technologies, including energy generation, transmission, storage, and end use. So hydrogen also systems belong here. And thirdly, support innovation and research. Europe needs to be a leader. This is our strong recommendation in the digital and smart systems of the future and the technologies. And so there is a clear role for Europe to provide the leadership if we can have the right approach toward decarbonization and getting the energy transition right. This is not from our report. It's a different background, as you can see. I just wanted to share with you, this was published 2 weeks ago by N21, how the investments look like in modern renewables. As you can see here, look at the right, 2020 estimates, European Union together with the other highly industrialized countries has actually invested less than the developing countries, including China. Now you could say that's good news. The global south has to invest, but we all need to increase the investment significantly. This is essential for reducing the future cost and making this transition affordable, basically through learning by doing, and nobody knows what will be the winning strategy. So we need a number of approaches, but I think our assessment shows that electrification and the role of hydrogen would be important. Our second recommendation is to recognize the roles of all actors and stakeholders in creating an inclusive and participatory environment that incentivizes and supports low carbon energy choices. So that means participatory and inclusive process to improve the efficiency, Kitty talked about that as well, reduce energy use, but ensure sufficient services for all for decent life. So it's a dual challenge, sufficiency and efficiency, I would call it. Then support the participation and innovation among all actors and stakeholders, public, private, individuals, households at local level, national, European, and international level. So this is crucial. And the third is really important in my view, redistribute additional revenue created by energy taxation and carbon pricing to support low-income groups and promote sustainable energy systems. So offsetting low-income groups, there's some 30 million people in Europe right now who cannot afford to pay for their heating. We need to use some of the revenues, for example, from auctioning tradable permits to support both investment, innovation, but also support those so that nobody is left behind. This is from Making Peace with Nature report of the UNEP, where we essentially made the same recommendation. As you can see, clockwise governments, international organizations, financial organizations, private sector, NGOs, individuals, all of us, and then importantly, scientific and educational stakeholders so that future generations also will continue working on this transformation because the world will not end in 2030 or 2050. And now I come to the final recommendation is to support a coordinated combination of policies, measures, and instruments, including carbon pricing as a driving force to shape effective, consistent, and just regulatory system. And I'm sure that Sabine will say a little bit more about that in the second part of our presentation. But we put emphasis on coordinating combination of regulatory measures and incentives for the transition because there is no silver bullet. We need a portfolio. And we also need a clear political commitment to undertake supporting actions to steadily move toward high carbon prices and other greenhouse prices. And this is a really tall order to cover all social and environmental costs. It's a must, but we need to protect those that nobody is left behind. And last but not least, let me just say, insist on the reciprocal climate commitments by other countries. Think of US, Japan, Russia, they are all committed to carbon neutrality by 2050 as well. China by 2060. So they could be decarbonization clubs to achieve wider synergies beyond Europe, of course, inconsistent with the World Trade Organization rules and procedures. But I could imagine, and we argue in the report, that the border adjustment might be necessary, and that would also raise additional revenues. So let me conclude here. I just wanted to share this picture with you at the end, because some of you might think, well, this is a really tall order, Herculean effort. There is no way we can do it in a short period of time. These pictures illustrate that we did manage that during the Industrial Revolution. On top, you see railways, then flying machines, telecommunication systems, individual mobility, and the bottom, industrial processes. And I think what's important is also the vertical, that we do produce systems that work together. And Of course, none of us know what the future will look like and what technologies might be willing, but I dare a futuristic guess. You have hydrogen pipelines on top, pervasive electrification, and perhaps electric hydrogen aircraft. But that's not the point. I think the main point is that we need to invest in the systems that we combine well to have safe planet and justice for everybody without leaving anybody behind. So I will stop here and stop sharing my screen and give over to Sabine for the second part. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Naki, and a warm welcome from my side to all of you. And perhaps now someone can share my slides, perhaps. So there was one person who wanted to share my slides.
We will share your slides, no problem, just wait a bit. And please be patient, slide change might take up to 5 seconds.
Okay.
We can see the slides now. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
perfect. You. Thank you so much. So the SAPEA opinion I would like to present in the next 10 minutes is part of a project being carried out by the European Commission Scientific Advice Mechanism on a systemic approach to the energy transition in Europe. My colleague, Professor Nakicinovic, just presented this advice mechanism. And our main question addressed in this report is, how can the European Commission contribute to the preparation for, acceleration and facilitation of the energy transition in Europe, given the present state of knowledge on the possible transition pathways? So this question is more or less similar to the question Naki suggested a few minutes before, but perhaps we were going on a little bit in detail, a little bit more in the deep research questions. And this next slide, please. This evidence review report has been produced by 20 members of different scientific disciplines. So, namely physics, engineering science, economics, energy technology, material and environmental science, as well as, and this I think is a very crucial and important point, as well as social and educational studies, law, this was my part, so I'm a legal scholar, and politics. This way, the natural sciences and the humanities have been united. And here you have the list. I wanted to show you the faces, the photos, but I didn't get all the photos for this presentation. So sorry for that. So next, please. And now I want to come back to our topic, the challenges for the European Union to manage the deep and comprehensive transformation of the energy system towards climate neutrality are great. You all know that, and Naki spoke of heroic efforts. We have just witnessing the adoption of the EU climate law by the Parliament last week. The EU climate law changes the EU's legal climate and energy architecture by adding the long-term objective of climate neutrality by 2050 and raising the 2030 greenhouse gas reduction target to 55%. You all know that. And it also adds, and that is important too, to the governance mechanism, so set up by the governance regulation, by establishing further rules for reporting and monitoring regarding the climate neutrality objective. You can call this European climate law a new framework, but it is not the only framework we have. Beside, we have also the governance regulation, and it is still not clear how much the respective targets to be achieved by the ETS sectors and non-ETS sectors, if they are going raised. For certain, they are going to be raised. Furthermore, the LULUCF regulation needs to be changed, and at the moment we don't know how this is working out, because, for example, me and the other 19 members of the group were not members of the Commission, knowing what is going on. So even though this so we do not know what will bring us the 55, the Fit for 55 package on the 14th July of this year. Even though it's this has not been agreed on so far, the impact assessment of the Commission from last year foresees that the overarching goals of the Energy Efficiency Directive must be raised to 36 to 37% by 2030. Likewise, the renewable energy share might have been raised to 38 to 40%. So, next, please. So these are the milestones of the Fit for 55 package. You see here the different secondary climate-related acts of the European Union, which might be or which should be and shall be transformed, revised by the Fit for 55 package. Our report aims at being an appropriate contribution to raising awareness of systemic issues. We do not influence or affect the wording nor the concrete design of the Fit for 55 package. This was not the aim of the report at all. Our report is a valuable contribution for the long-term strategies the EU has to develop according to the Paris Agreement. And in this sense, the Fit for 55 package marks only the beginning of a systemic debate and a systemic transformation. Our report advocates the need for the right approaches for maximum effectiveness to achieve the Paris goals and to propose evidence-based policy options. Next, please. We started in this report with an evaluation of the philosophies of the Commission's main scenarios aiming at achieving the 55% target from last September. And this is interesting for the current discourse because we have developed criteria here that the Commission did not apply for the assessment of different scenarios for the 55% target. And these are, in my opinion, fundamental criteria that could also serve in the future as criteria for an evaluation of the EU Fit for 55 package. Next, please. These assessment criteria are effectiveness, firstly. The criterion of effectiveness aims to determine whether the chosen policy strategy is effective in achieving the EU's climate change objectives. Effective means, firstly, whether the mix of instruments is consistent. For example, the instruments do not contradict each other. And secondly, whether the implementation and enforcement of these instruments can be controlled and perhaps sanctioned by the EU vis-à-vis the member states. The second criterion is the transformative potential. The question here is whether the selected instruments are aimed at a system-wide transformation of the energy system. This includes, firstly, the question of whether the instruments that are to be implemented by the member states are also effectively controlled. And secondly, the question of whether the instruments are capable of bringing about long-term behavioral changes among the society. The third criterion is economic efficiency. The individual choices, decisions, and actions of private and public actors must be coordinated in an efficient way. And efficiency means achieving climate goals at the lowest cost. This requires coordination of instruments and requires instruments that send clear signals to the market. Furthermore, information deficits should be avoided. And the fourth criterion is system compatibility. This requires legal coherence, avoidance of carbon leakage, and maintaining a social balance. And the last criterion is political feasibility. With this criterion, the decision-making processes is evaluated whether there are hurdles, for example, regard to the decision-making mode, majority or unanimity requirement, or past dependencies implied by the previous course of national or European energy and climate policy. So now I come to the end and finish with the last slide. In addition to these criteria, and the recommendation Naki already has presented, it should be that should be used for an evaluation of the policy mix or on permanent basis. We have formulated 6 central policy recommendations with which I will finish, and I summarize these recommendations as follows. The first option we call shaping an effective and efficient regulatory strategy. It concerns the question of governance and regulation. In this regard, we recommend a strong carbon pricing mechanism, at best an extended emissions trading system, which includes all relevant sectors, also transport and heating, cooling, as part of a mixture of regulatory measures and incentives. And the political decision makers should commit to very high carbon prices. Otherwise, that will not work. If we do have low prices, there will be no changes in behavior. By the middle of the century, reflecting the full environmental impact of greenhouse gases. And in this context, we are very keen to stress out that the energy transition needs to be socially equitable, that Naki already mentioned. Therefore, revenues raised in the way should be used for support to ensure that no one is left behind. The second option, supporting technical innovation, puts the focus upon technological progress and the supply chain security. New energy and end-user technologies will play a key role in the successful transition of the energy system, which requires high investments. In order to successfully carry out technological innovations, we propose a two-stream approach. On one hand, the state is obligated to direct the process of promoting innovations, and on the other hand, the state is required to enable a framework for companies to excel through the force of competition. And at the same time, we need to monitor the supply chain of materials needed to support clean energy technologies. We have to design strategies to expand and diversify the European material base in order to secure our access to critical materials in terms of avoiding new dependencies. Thirdly, in our opinion, Europe is well placed to take a global lead in reducing emissions in a way that it is economically efficient and socially equitable, while maintaining competitiveness. And from a geopolitical perspective, Europe should strengthen its diplomatic efforts to ensure that the Paris Agreement is implemented by everyone. And point 4, in our opinion, new energy market designs and structures are required. They have to be able to balance supply and demand by including variable renewable energy sources into the system and crack the enormous challenge of large-scale electrification. And to finish, in our report, we present furthermore efficient integration of both supply and demand systems by means of different system integration approaches and sector coupling as possible solutions. And at least we point out in our report that facilitating public behavior and action as at multiple levels is just as important as developing new technologies. Without the public, without the inhabitants of Europe, we will not, we will not have succeed in front of these challenges. Given the fact that most of the greenhouse gas emissions can be ascribed to households, and we call upon politics not to view households as passive recipients loosely connected to climate change, but as active participants whose lifestyles play a central and a disruptive role in contributing to energy and climate problems. So these are the six policy options we recommended, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to both of you for this very interesting overview. And it's a pity that you also don't know what will bring us the 14th of July, but I was expecting that, and the tension is rising from second to second, of course, especially for us in the parliament, as we are really eager to see what happens. But I think we are all in the same boat here. So I think we will, of course, have the time for questions after our last panelist, our last speaker for today. The last one, but of course, also very important, is Jakob Waxmut from the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research. And he will discuss with us the potential of hydrogen for decarbonizing the EU industry. And if I may add one personal sentence, this is especially for me of utmost importance. And when we started to work with STOA on the study which I suggested, I had of course in mind that we indeed need to transform European industry to a sustainable, to a climate neutral future. So I'm very much looking also forward to your presentation, and I can see it's already up and running. So the stage is yours, and feel free to don't rush. So I think we, as I said, my closing remarks are not absolutely necessary. So it's more necessary to discuss.
Thanks, Timo, for the kind introduction. This is Jakob speaking from the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research based in Karlsruhe, Germany. And we are carrying out this study for the STOA panel jointly with the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And I will give you now a short outlook on what we are currently preparing, as this is ongoing work and not finished, but will be published in autumn. So I think we have already heard quite a lot about the background. In particular, there's the European Hydrogen Strategy published last year, which foresees kind of three phases in the use and production of hydrogen that are also seen in this figure here. So first, an upscaling of the technologies, both on the production and the demand side, then further interconnection on a regional level first, and then maybe later on the whole European level. And this is then connected with a rollout of hydrogen across the sectors where it is relevant. In particular, we talk here about the so-called hard to decarbonize sectors, such as energy-intensive industries, but also certain parts of transport. I will spend a few more words on that later on. So, I will not go into the details about the background anymore, as we have learned a lot about this. There's the increased 2030 target, and of course the climate neutrality objective in 2050. Then the hydrogen strategy and the European Hydrogen Alliance established last year, and now we are all waiting for the Fit for 55 package. But with respect to hydrogen, also the hydrogen and gas market decarbonization package that will come up at the end of the year will be very important. And so what are our objectives in the study against this background? This is first of all a stock taking of what is the current state of play regarding the potential of hydrogen along the whole value chain, with the focus on the use in the industry sector, but also beyond. And then we look at which are the current policies in place to foster the realization of the hydrogen strategy and where there are gaps. Of course, a lot of it is expected from the upcoming packages now, but already now we have in the current Renewable Energy Directive, we have some regulations on this. We have the draft of the revised 10E regulation on European infrastructures. And so we have scanned the literature here, synthesized, also carried out expert interviews and to come up with our thinking about where there are still gaps to be filled, and then also to propose policy options in the end, which will help to create a hydrogen ecosystem enabling the replacement of fossil fuels in these hard to decarbonize sectors. And so to give you just a short glimpse on what we are up to, is that we have looked at this under 3 domains. So it is under the sustainable use of production of hydrogen. Then there's hydrogen markets and infrastructures to be developed, and the actors, region, and the international perspective. And I was glad to see that the Commission already has also all these topics on the table, I guess. And this is, of course, related to the key actions which are addressed in the hydrogen strategy, which is to provide an investment agenda for the European Union, boosting demand and scaling up production of both renewable and low carbon hydrogen, and then also to design an enabling and supportive framework for hydrogen use and trading and transport. And then finally also that to promote research and innovation in hydrogen, and to look at the international dimension. So to, in particular, as we see that there will be a need for imports of green hydrogen in addition to the local production, which is of course also very important. And so, to give you a short outlook on what are the most important policy gaps we currently see, is that we all are discussing about, so there are these important sectors where we will use it, because hydrogen will stay a costly resource also in the longer term. So electrification will in most cases be a cheaper and more efficient option. And so the hydrogen use should be prioritized in sectors which cannot be electrified or have limited potential here. And so this means there should be a hierarchy for uses which will inform also, for example, where there's a need for support schemes and where not. So let me say that, for example, in the building sector, there are a lot of alternatives to hydrogen use. And so we see this as only an option that could turn out to be relevant in the future, but is not prioritized. But on the other hand, there are these hard to decarbonize sectors where even hydrogen is used today and produced, such as ammonia production and refineries, but also steel industry. But we think that even here we need more clear guidance. For example, if we don't need refineries to the same extent as today in the future, should we also support them when using green hydrogen, or should it be focused to the other sectors? And related to this is that we see the need for designing further support schemes. Of course, there is the Innovation Fund, which fosters important innovative projects in this regard, but for a broader diffusion across industries, there will be a need for additional funding. And here we are particularly looking at the so-called carbon contracts for difference, which are currently designed in certain member states, such as Germany or the Netherlands, have a similar scheme called SDE++. But we think that there could be overarching principles, in particular in relation to state aid guidelines, to make sure that these are in line with the European state aid regulation. And then when we look at hydrogen markets and infrastructures, currently there is only bilateral or almost only bilateral networks and only trading on a very limited level. So currently there is nothing to regulate. But on the other hand, to provide certainty to investors and also to guide the way, for example, for this repurposing. We see that there's a need to at least establish the general rules of market and infrastructure regulation, but remain flexible, as has been pointed out also by the Commission in the beginning. And then this is also related to this aspect of certification schemes. And here we see that currently there are a lot of activities that are scattered. There's the Certify scheme developed by the industry. Then there's some regulations in the Renewable Energy Directive, which currently apply only to transport, but we expect this to be changed with the Fit for 55 package. And then there will, of course, be the gas market package. And so we see that there's a need here for a unification of the specific criteria and to make sure that everything is covered. And then looking at the actors, regions, and international perspective, we see that due to the need for imports, if we do so, we have, and we also consider low carbon hydrogen, we have to make sure that this is really a sustainable produced hydrogen, and this covers a lot of aspects. On the one hand, there has to be robust monitoring and verification that it is indeed coming with substantial greenhouse gas emission reductions, so that if it includes, for example, carbon capture and storage, that this is permanent, but also that we don't take away the renewable electricity of other countries, which then use, for example, coal power instead for their own energy consumption, while exporting green hydrogen to the EU. And finally, with respect to participation, we see that there's a high mobilization of actors currently in industry, both with regard to producers and to users. And there's a high mobilization across policymakers, but currently civil society is not taking part too much in the debate, which you can, for example, see in the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. And we think that this is important to foster the participation of additional groups here, to make sure that we have acceptance and also to make sure that nobody is left behind. So this is all I wanted to say to you. Thank you for your attention, and watch out for the study that will be published in October on the STOA website.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we are waiting, or at least I am waiting eagerly for the publication of the study. And I know that many colleagues are also interested in your findings. So this concludes the round of the first statements and presentations. Thank you very much for all your very, very helpful presentations. The guys following us on the web stream, please feel free to direct questions to us via Twitter. And of course, we want to discuss now. So please indicate either in the chat or by raising your virtual hands that you want to take the floor, or just wave. I will see you. I think I can see all of you at the same time. Yes, I do. So this would be now the opportunity to raise questions and or even make very short remarks. But while we are maybe waiting for the first questions from the audience, I would have a question to all of our experts today. So the upscale of renewable hydrogen will cost a lot. I think that this is obvious, but the question remains: who should bear this cost? Should it be the European Union? Should it be the member states? Should it be companies or consumers? So in Germany, I think we are at the moment debating the question to finance the gas infrastructure together, so jointly. So this would mean that everyone needs to contribute on the costs. So what are your ideas? Who should cover the costs for upgrading our energy systems to more sustainable or more hydrogen use? I don't know. Maybe someone wants to go first. Yeah, Kitty and then Naki. Okay, perfect.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is a question that is asked in a way before any major transformation or any major change compared to the past, or disruption, if we will, because yes, hydrogen will be needed. It's a good new opportunity, and as every opportunity, until it scales up and until it reaches economies of scale, it will be more expensive than the traditional technologies. So it will have to compete, and in order to be able to compete, it will need some support in the beginning. And that support can be, of course, in the form of targets, for example, or in the form of sectoral incentives. And this is what we have announced already in the strategies and are now exploring with regards to the Renewable Energy Directive, because that's the directive, as it was rightly mentioned already before, that has already some targets for renewable fuels of non-biological origin, and that's where hydrogen is falling under as well. And indeed, we are looking to extend those beyond the transport sector, also to other sectors. So that's one way of creating the demand, kind of pull the hydrogen into the demand sectors. But as said, we have important funding already now at the European level. I mean, we had already the Horizon programs, and we have the Innovation Fund that were already mentioned. But with the recovery plans, we have the unique opportunity to really put money into the green transition. So really not only relaunch the economies, as we need to relaunch them after the crisis that the pandemics has caused, but we have also to invest into our future, so to put that to the service of the Green Deal and to the green transformation.
Thank you so much, Naki. And I think, Jakob, you also want to take the floor, right? Yeah, okay, then.
Well, thank you. I think this is really a pertinent question. I mean, I think most of you are aware that hydrogen has been with us for the last 50 years, and it never made it, precisely because of your question, that the costs are high and we did not manage to support the technologies to make them competitive. And I just wanted to remind you, I mean, that's like 50 years ago, 40 years ago, there was even a commercial aircraft, Tupolev 154, that flew on hydrogen. So, and Airbus had lots of studies. So my point is that we need to support these new technologies. We need to somehow organize funding for the high upfront costs. And, you know, think of the metaphor of the photovoltaics. That's how it started. So subsidies of the high upfront costs at the beginning for special niche markets. In case of photovoltaics, that was the space program, you know, expensive yachts. So we need niche markets like that for hydrogen. I think some of them are obvious, and Kitty and others and Jakob mentioned that. You know, there would be trucks, for example, long-haul trucks, at least some part of the fleet that also goes into the cities. Then ships and probably also aircraft. So we need these high-value markets. Hydrogen needs to be produced off-peak when the renewable energy otherwise would be wasted. I mean, this is the big advantage of hydrogen, is for mobility and storage. And so I would conclude that we need the sunset clause. Then we need to create clear niche markets so the technology becomes competitive, that we can benefit from the learning by doing and learning by using that we have seen in all of the new technologies. And the great advantage of hydrogen, in my view, is not just that it's zero emissions, but it's also a technology that is granular in some sense. Once you have the infrastructure, the technologies that are close to the end use could be more easily supported. So I will stop here.
Thank you very much. Jakob, before I hand over to you, I would add for you also a question on carbon contracts for difference. So if you agree, and as Professor Schlacke just indicated, she wants to take the floor after Naki, if it's okay for you, I would take her first and then ask you to come in and also combine it with my question on the carbon contracts for difference, okay?
Fine, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Timo Wölken. I only want to add that at the end, we need state funding for the first phase of hydrogen transformation. So we need the EU money, and we need the member states money, and they have to support financially this first and perhaps also the second phase. And at the end, it is the taxpayer who pays. Yeah, so we need to tell this, we need to say this to the public, and we also have to say what is the advantage of this transformation. And so I think this is a discussion we need, and what you, Jakob Waxmut, mentioned already, we need to bring this in the public discourse, and then we have a sensibilization of the public, I would say, and we have also the participation of the public and the NGOs in this debate. So this is, beside the financial side, we need, I think, a public discourse about this technology.
I would totally agree, but Jakob, so the floor would be yours now. And my question, as you mentioned, the carbon contracts for difference. So are a few model projects with maybe in the well, it's just some billion, is that enough, or do we need to roll out these contracts on a massive scale? So this would be my additional question on that.
Yeah, okay, then I start with the cost, and I think a lot of has already been said, and I maybe add a bit on the infrastructure, as also you pointed out in the beginning, that there's the debate whether this could maybe be financed by the current gas infrastructure users, but here our current thinking is that as there are also a lot of other actors profiting, and it is not sure that the gas users will profit, that it is really public money, the taxpayer, that should support the uptake of the hydrogen infrastructure and not only the gas users. And now let's say because in the end, if there is an infrastructure which is heavily used, then this has clear cost benefits. We know this from a lot of studies. But this also means that we have to make sure that the infrastructure will meet the needs, and that we don't create an infrastructure that is, for example, much too large. So there should always be, we have to have a flexible approach here that takes care that it is in line with the expected hydrogen use and production, and this is currently still rather uncertain. So a granular approach will be very useful. And on the carbon contracts for difference, this is a good question. And as you say, I would at least say that it is not sufficient to have just a few projects demonstrating these technologies as a first of a kind example. But for example, when we look at the steel industry, I think that we need kind of, there is not too many steel companies, but still there are quite some, and in a way that a lot of them can profit from it. So to have a first demonstration of their own, that because then this forces that they can diffuse the technology to their other sites in a way. But I just think I cannot give a full and clear answer to this, as this is really a difficult one.
Okay, thank you so much. Does anyone else have a take on that? Yeah, Kitty, please.
Maybe just to say that this is exactly one of the points that we are looking in the context of our upcoming hydrogen and gas decarbonization package, because of course the question how you finance the future hydrogen networks is a very relevant one. And we can, of course, take some examples from the gas market development in the past. But this question of whether it should be allowed or not to cross-subsidize the hydrogen networks via the regulated asset basis of the gas networks, that also has lots of other considerations than just the ramping up of the hydrogen market. We have to also look at who are the users of the current gas, and of course you do have industry partly there, but you have also very high share, and in certain member states, an even higher share of households as gas users. So the moment you cross-finance the hydrogen networks from the gas networks, and hydrogen in an initial phase would be used mainly by industry, there is a risk that you would levy the cost of the industrial uses, also partially on domestic users, so households, and not just the other industry users. Then the other question is, of course, the way today's gas markets work, that there are entry-exit tariffs and there are cross-border tariffs. Of course, you do have also domestic users that contribute to the costs of the gas system, but also cross-border users. So the question is, can you use the revenues coming from cross-border users for developing your own hydrogen network? So that's also a kind of a question about transfers between the different countries, not just between the different user groups. So these all require very, very thorough reflections. And this is indeed what we are doing before we will put anything on this on the table.
That's good to hear, but I wasn't doubting that. So as always, thank you. So as I said, so if someone has a question, just indicate it in the chat or raise your hand. In the meantime, I would have another one, so sorry for that. But as I don't see any questions, I take the opportunity and the freedom to go ahead. And I want to come back to the presentation by Naki and Professor Schlacke. So you mentioned that it is important to distribute the money earned by ETS scheme or by the carbon price, let's put it neutral, that it's impossible, that it's necessary to channel it back to consumers, to citizens. And this is exactly where I am afraid that the European Union can't provide this redistribution to consumers, because we won't be in the position to set rules as we are missing competences. So last week or this week, Commissioner Timmermans updated the elements of the Fit for 55 package by including a social fund or a climate social fund. But to be honest, my concerns are not, my concerns still remain, because I'm afraid that we will earn money at the European level. We don't have the instruments to make sure that this is channeled back to the citizens, so we would have to rely on the member states. And in the end, we could create the story that the European Union increases the prices of energy, of housing, of traveling, of transport, and we would become the Buhmann, I don't know the English translation. So the European Union would become responsible for higher prices, and the member states would have the instruments to tackle this, but we can't force them. So for me, this is quite problematic. So what's your idea? How could we do this in a fair way to redistribute the money to consumers? I don't know who wants to take this. Naki? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, to be clear, I really don't have an answer to your very difficult question, because that's a question of implementation. But I think there are some principal issues here. One is that the pricing of carbon is very regressive, like almost any other flat tax, like the value-added tax. It hits those who are poor, and we already have people energy poor in Europe. Let me characterize it that way. And the big disparity, and we shouldn't forget that the income disparity has been increasing. And I think Europe is a country or continent, and European Union, that is leading in the issues of social responsibility and making sure nobody is left behind. So we need to find a solution to that. And the reason why we, in the opinion, based on the evidence report of SAPEA that Sabine presented, the reason why we argued is that the potential revenue that come out of auctioning of the permits, and you have seen that the cost of permits has gone up. Now it's very likely that the permits will have to be, the trade-over permits will have to be extended to the other sectors that are not included now. I would argue that, levying carbon tax would be perhaps even more difficult to implement, as we know from the decades of discussions. And so to make a long story short, this revenue would be a new pot of money that could be redistributed. How to do that exactly, I don't know. And Timmermans' proposal of a social fund, I think, is perfectly consistent with that. But maybe the funding from the social fund would be a different source. But you're still facing the same problem. All we were trying to argue is that there is a new additional revenue that could be used for social equity to make sure that, Fit for 55 and the Green Deal is actually just, as it's one of its major objectives. So I think this is what's important to keep in mind. So that would be my contribution to the attempt of answering your question at the principal level. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And then Sabine Schlacker, please.
Yes, thank you. I think this is one very crucial point, and we discussed this in our group very deeply. The problem is that perhaps not every field is compatible with an ETS system or with a carbon pricing. If you take Germany as an example, we have since 2019 the so-called Brennstoffemissionshandelsgesetz. That is a legal act to introduce an ETS for the sectors transport and building, and for the first 5 years we have it established like a tax, and after 5 years we will go over to a market system. But the problem is that already now there is no change in the behavior of the flat owners. Yeah, we do not have a change. What do? The costs they hand over to the tenants. Yeah, that's sure. So there will be no change, and perhaps there exists, if we now compensate, or there will be a new legal act, and then it will say that we have to share the costs between tenant and flat owner. Yeah, so this is now the solution, but it is not really a good solution in my opinion. So first of all, for the implementation, the member states have the power, so the legislative power, and they have to implement the European legal acts, the directives, for example, they have to transform. So it is more or less in the competencies of the member states. And secondly, perhaps we have to reflect to use other instruments in special sectors. For example, command and control regulations, like we have to forbid the oil heatings by 2030 or something like that. Yeah, so we have to combine it. I think only to say, so we make a compensation system with a huge effort, and that costs also, I don't know if every member state will agree with this.
Most certainly not. So this would be my expectation. Jakob or Kitty, do you want to come in on this specific point? No? Okay. Are there any remarks any one of you would like to make in the end before I wrap this up? This seems not to be the case. Okay, then let me start by thanking you for taking the time for this very interesting discussion. As I said, this is recorded, so hopefully it's possible that more people can watch it. And well, what we learned today is that we unfortunately have to wait until the 14th of July to see the final elements of the Fit for 55 package. And my understanding is that even with the proposals on the table in 2 weeks, we will indeed have many areas where we need to continue discussion and where we need to make sure that the European Union does not only deliver on achieving our ambitious and very necessary climate goals, but also in delivering a social answer to the pressing questions. And this will be quite a challenge. And the good news is that we can all agree that hydrogen plays a central role in the transition. And I think renewable hydrogen plays a central role in the transition. to a low carbon economy and society. And I'm very much looking forward to work with my colleagues, but also with the scientific input on solutions which will indeed make the European Union in the end climate neutral. So I'm really dedicated to that. But of course, we will see a lot of social challenges we need to overcome, and we need the right answers too. With this said, thank you very much for taking part in this discussion. Thank you very much for providing the presentations, and for everyone who hasn't received it, I think the STOA panel can, or the STOA can distribute it if wanted. And I would like to thank the STOA STOA members, all our advisors and assistants who made this event possible and prepared it, briefed me, and made sure that we are indeed today live web streamed. So that's always a challenge. And sorry, thank you so much for all of you and to all of you, and I wish you hopefully a nice weekend. Stay safe, and I'm looking forward to the intense discussions in the month ahead of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.